Here are the worst people in history, like Sarah Davy. Sarah Davy was just 14 in 1998 when she and her 15-year-old friend Lisa Healy killed someone. They gained the trust of Lily Lilly, a 71-year-old pensioner, by befriending her. Once inside her home on West Street in Oldham, they unleashed a brutal assault. Shampoo was squirted into her eyes, she was slashed with a knife, and a gag was forced so tight that her dentures lodged in her throat, ultimately causing her death. They transported her body in a trash can and then dumped it in the Rochdale Canal. Following the murder, Davy and Healy used the victim's phone to make hundreds of calls and spent her pension money on snacks and sweets. Luckily, in 1999, they were arrested, and at the age of 14, Davy received an indeterminate life sentence, with her friend getting the same. She spent 14 years of her sentence at Askham Grange Women's Prison before being released on license in March. However, within months, she violated the terms of her release by testing positive for cocaine, resulting in her recall to custody. Over the next decade, she was released and recalled a total of 7 times, repeatedly breaching license conditions. Notably, in 2022, her 8th parole bid was denied after tests revealed opioids in her system. Most recently, following a lengthy parole hearing, she was released once more on March 23, 2024, this time under stringent conditions designed to manage potential risks to the public. The parole board emphasized that their decision was based on thorough review of her case history, current behavior, and expert testimony, with public safety as their top priority. Moving on to Colton Harris Moore. Colton Harris Moore, at only age 12, was first convicted for theft, and by 13, he had multiple convictions, including vandalism. After a break-in at his middle school in 2005, he served 3 years in juvenile facilities. In April 2008, he escaped that facility and disappeared into the woods, triggering a surge in burglaries and thefts across Island and San Juan counties. Over the next 2 years, Harris Moore evolved from a petty thief into an internationally recognized outlaw. He stole vehicles, boats, and small aircrafts, learning to fly by reading manuals and watching flight simulation videos. He left chalk barefoot footprints and the phrase, "See ya," at several crime scenes, reinforcing his growing legend. By the spring of 2010, authorities suspected him in more than 100 thefts. The fugitive's spree took a dark turn in the spring of 2010. He flew a Cessna 400 out of Bloomington, Indiana, heading toward the Bahamas, likely intending to avoid U.S. law enforcement. His flight ended near Sandy Point, is where the plane crashed. Bahamian authorities intercepted him during a dramatic boat chase. His fleeing vessel's engine was disabled by gunfire, and he briefly threatened self-harm before being arrested. He promptly pleaded guilty to illegal plane landing and unauthorized entry in Bahamian court, receiving a light sentence, a $300 fine and 3 months in jail, but was deported to the U.S. immediately. On July 14, 2010, he appeared before a U.S. federal magistrate in Miami and was transferred to SeaTac, Washington, pending charges there. On June 17, 2011, he pleaded guilty to federal charges including burglary, interstate transportation of stolen aircraft and vessels, weapons offenses, and fleeing authorities. In January 2012, federal authorities added a 6.5-year sentence to be served concurrently. Following his sentencing, he expressed remorse and said he intended to study for a degree in aeronautical engineering during incarceration. In September 2016, after serving 6 years, he was released on parole to a halfway house near Seattle. He took an office job in his defense attorney's law firm and was initially approved for flight school funds until his parole officer required the money to go to restitution for victims totaling about $129,000. This kid had a pretty crazy life, but this next kid is crazier cause he killed 4 people in the same day. Ethan Couch. Ethan Anthony Couch, a 16-year-old, on the night of June 15, 2013, stole 2 cases of beer from a Walmart, then drove his father's Ford F-350 at about 70 miles per hour, nearly twice the speed limit while drunk. He sped down a residential road in Burleson, Texas, and plowed into a group helping a stalled SUV, killing 4 people. Following the crash, law enforcement arrested a disoriented Couch, found passed out in a ditch. His blood alcohol concentration was a staggering 0.24%, triple the adult legal limit. By September 2013, Couch had been indicted on 4 counts of intoxication manslaughter and 2 of intoxication assault. The victims' families initiated 7 civil lawsuits against him, his parents, and his father's company. In December, Judge Jean Boyd sentenced him to 10 years of probation and placement in a long-term residential treatment facility without specifying how long he would remain there. In February 2014, Couch began treatment at North Texas State Hospital, but that wasn't the end of the chaos. Civil suits progressed. By May 2014, settlements were reached, including a $2 million settlement for paralyzed victim Sergio Molina. On December 2, 2015, Couch had appeared breaking his probation after a video on social media showing what appeared to be the 18-year-old Ethan at a beer pong party. He was officially listed as a fugitive after authorities couldn't locate him. With a $5,000 reward posted, a search by U.S. Marshals ensued. Couch and his mother Tanya were found in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Ironically tracked via a pizza delivery phone call, Tanya was promptly returned to the U.S. and charged with hindering apprehension. Ethan's deportation was initially delayed, but he ultimately returned on January 28, 2016. After transfer to adult court on April 13, 2016, Judge Wayne Salvant sentenced him to 720 days in jail for violating probation. He was released from that term in April 2018 under strict conditions: ankle monitor, later removed in March 2019, alcohol patch, curfew, drug tests, and an ignition interlock on his vehicle. This guy is crazy, and so is this kid, who did a shooting at an elementary school. Brenda Spencer, in January 1972, saw her parents divorced amid allegations of infidelity, leaving Brenda and her siblings in the custody of their father. They lived in poverty, often sleeping together on a living room mattress in a house filled with alcohol bottles. Brenda later alleged severe neglect and abuse by her father, including sexual exploitation, claims he denied. She was described by acquaintances as withdrawn and had a tense relationship with authority figures. By late 1978, Brenda was under juvenile probation after vandalizing her school. During that probation, a psychiatric evaluation recommended mental health hospitalization for her depression, but her father refused and instead weirdly bought her a semi-automatic rifle and ammunition for Christmas, an act Brenda later said was so she could end herself, which she didn't, but she did have different plans. On the morning of January 29, 1979, 15-year-old Brenda opened fire from the window of her home at Grover Cleveland Elementary School. She fired 36 rounds at students, staff, and responding officers during a roughly 20-minute assault. 2 adults were killed, Principal Burton Ragg and custodian Michael Sucher, and 9 others were injured, including 8 children and San Diego police officer Robert Robb. During the standoff, which lasted over 6 hours, she spoke to a reporter by phone and offered the infamous explanation, "I just don't like Mondays. This livens up the day." Police negotiations even include the promise of a Burger King meal to convince her to surrender. She did. Charged as an adult, Brenda pleaded guilty in 1980 to 2 counts of first-degree murder and assault with a deadly weapon. On April 4, 1980, one day after turning 18, she was sentenced to concurrent terms of 25 years to life. Over the decades, Brenda has been denied parole multiple times. She remains incarcerated, with her next parole hearing scheduled for 2028. Gabriel Etzby Ocean. On July 4, 2024, Gabriel Etzby Ocean, a 29-year-old Westminster resident, set off fireworks in the narrow space between his house and that of his neighbor, Anthony Fox and Nicole Betts. The fireworks ignited unexpectedly, and rather than fizzing harmlessly, they sparked flames that rapidly spread to Fox and Betts' home. By the time fire crews arrived, significant damage had already been done. Fox described scenes of roof and wall sections collapsing and recalled that the fire department even had to force open the front door to search for anyone inside. In the midst of the panic, their beloved cat Apollo was trapped inside, but a sheriff's deputy managed to rescue the pet before things turned worse. At the scene, authorities arrested Ocean and charged him with first-degree arson. The charge stemmed directly from the allegation that he intentionally or recklessly set off the fireworks that caused the blaze. However, despite the severity of the charge, Ocean was released from jail later the same day and returned home to sleep in his own bed, while Fox and Betts found themselves without a home, staying in a hotel, and sifting through the remnants of what used to be their life. Although Fox offered to hold Ocean accountable, calling for compensation or responsibility. The efforts were reportedly met with silence. They launched a crowdfunding campaign to help finance their recovery and seek a fresh start elsewhere. Moving on to the story of Sebastian Andrews. Sebastian Andrews, a then 33-year-old resident of Wilton, Connecticut, was caught stabbing his neighbor 104 times. On the morning of March 21, 2023, Andrews' father witnessed him attacking their new neighbor, 39-year-old Arunzachukwu Ukachukwu, in the driveway of Ukachukwu's home on Patrick Lane. The father immediately called 911. Police responding to the scene found Andrews standing near the victim's body, shoeless and strangely calm, his face covered in adhesive bandages. His demeanor described by officers as a little off, with disjointed speech and behavior. Autopsy results revealed a horrific ordeal. Ukachukwu was stabbed a total of 104 times, 55 wounds to the torso, 27 to the head and neck, and 22 to the arms and legs. The spacing and uniformity of the wounds suggested Ukachukwu attempted to defend himself before being overpowered. During initial questioning, Andrews claimed self-defense. He said he believed Ukachukwu had trespassed repeatedly and left cryptic messages in his attic, and that he acted because he perceived Ukachukwu's gaze as menacingly crazed. However, his narrative often made little sense to investigators. Reinforcing concerns over his deteriorating mental health, the trial commenced in February 2025 before a 3-judge panel. On the defense side, Dr. David Lovejoy, a clinical neuropsychologist, testified Andrews exhibited a full psychotic break during the attack. Lovejoy detailed how Andrews' paranoid ideation had escalated, culminating in a complete loss of access to reasoning. After 3 days of hearings, in April 2025, the court accepted the insanity plea. The judges determined that Andrews' schizophrenia and delusional state rendered him legally insane at the time of the murder. On the final court day, Andrews received a 50-year commitment to the Whiting Forensic Institute, reflecting the severity of his condition and the danger he posed. Next is Paul Ailport. In the early morning hours of November 10, 2023, surveillance footage later showed 65-year-old Paul Glenn Ailport putting fireworks in his truck and setting the vehicle ablaze. Around 9:16 to 9:20 a.m., Ailport climbed into the burning truck and accelerated across his neighbor Ron Shiley's lawn, fireworks detonating from the bed as the truck hurtled toward the house. The truck tore through the side of the home and smashed into a bathroom, narrowly missing a 19-year-old woman who was about to step into the shower. The impact ignited a blaze on the home's north side. Burn marks from exploded fireworks dappled the lawn. Deputies from Lake County Sheriff's Office arrived to find the vehicle engulfed. Its driver slumped over the wheel, severely burned. Ron Sheila himself pulled Ailport from the wreck. Ailport's prosthetic legs became trapped under the truck's wreckage. Ailport was left bleeding and badly burned on his back, shoulders, right arm, and hand. He was transported to a burn unit in Utah for urgent treatment. Once stabilized, Ailport was returned to Lake County Jail, where he faced a series of criminal charges tied to this incident and earlier threats. Authorities documented extensive fire damage to the house and recovered remnants of a 228-shot triple cannon firework, which had fallen from the truck and contributed to the lawn's scorched appearance. Neighbors later recalled that the attack did not appear spontaneous. Over the summer of 2023, Ailport had repeatedly threatened to gasoline bomb the Sheeleys, even asking another neighbor which bedroom was occupied by specific residents. His erratic conduct, loud late-night engine revving, gunfire toward adjacent homes while under the influence of methamphetamine, and flashing spotlights had rattled the entire Paper Trail Road community. In the months following the November incident, Ailport was charged with multiple offenses, including attempted deliberate homicide, arson, criminal mischief, weapon enhancements, and possession of dangerous drugs. He initially entered an Alford plea to the homicide charge on December 5, 2024, implicitly acknowledging the evidence against him while not affirming guilt. On February 13, 2025, Judge John Larson sentenced him to 100 years in prison, then added a 10-year enhancement for use of the fiery, weaponized truck, bringing the total to 110 years. While this neighbor was a serious danger to society, this next one is just plain weird. Alan Davis. Alan Davis, a 69-year-old retired mechanic, first attracted local local attention in April 2000 when people noticed his house looked like a junkyard. County code officers cited his property for objectionable, unsightly, or unsanitary matter. These initial violations set the stage for a legal battle enduring more than 2 decades. In 2002, the county pursued cleanup efforts to his home. Contractors hauled away an estimated 35 tons of debris, cars, pipes, satellite dishes, and more, but Davis quickly rebuilt the piles of trash shortly afterward. By 2004, Davis had escalated from civil fines to criminal charges. Prosecutors convicted him under Florida's litter law for illegal dumping of over 500 pounds of trash. He received a third-degree felony and spent nearly 4 years in state prison for repeatedly violating disposal restrictions during supervised release. Undeterred, Davis started hoarding again upon release. Seminole County pursued an escalating enforcement campaign. By mid-January 2025, outstanding fines and liens towards Allen totaled approximately $5.4 million, which he didn't pay nor even cared about. Despite filing code violations, the county's efforts were limited. State homestead protections prevented foreclosure. In 2015, authorities again cleared debris 30+ tons from Davis's property, spending approximately $9,000 in public funds. Yet miraculously, Davis had it all back within months. The legal pressure continued. In 2017, he entered a plea deal for a second felony littering charge. But when he failed to comply with terms, he was sentenced to another year in jail. Despite the repeated convictions and county interventions, Davis remained defiantly committed to his lifestyle. He describes his hoarding as a form of political protest, invoking First Amendment and property rights. He's known for installing provocative sculptures, such as a 6-foot fiberglass butt, yep, you heard that right, symbolically taunting officials and the community. He's been quoted saying, "Freedom has a look. This is what it looks like," and defiantly urging critics to kiss my ass. By May 2025, Davis continued steadily accruing fines and remained in non-compliance. While this guy is a bit of a weirdo, he's unlike the person who hid in their neighbor's closet. Wendy Wilkinson. On December 1st, 2023, Heinzman arrived home expecting a peaceful evening. Instead, she walked into a terrifying scenario. Wilkinson was crouched in Heinzman's walk-in closet, clutching a pizza cutter, cutting board, and kitchen towel, apparently ready to defend herself if discovered. Startled, Heinzman fled the apartment, but not before noticing Wilkinson spread out among her belongings. The chase commenced in the hallway of their apartment complex. Surveillance captured Heinzman pursuing Wilkinson, who dropped a house slipper as she fled. Irvine police were alerted, quickly obtaining a search warrant. During the search of Wilkinson's home and storage unit, officers recovered a trove of stolen property valued at over $30,000. Items included designer purses, sunglasses, Heinzman's credit cards, which had already been used for purchases, her TV, passport, and work ID. Wilkinson was taken into custody by Irvine police and booked on charges of burglary and possession of stolen property, as well as unauthorized use of personal identifying information. She pleaded not guilty during her first court appearance, which was scheduled for December 13, 2023. David and Louise Turpin. The parents, David and Louise Turpin, had 13 children by the mid-1980s that they would torture for decades. The couple increasingly isolated their children, enforcing extreme control. They reportedly fed them once a day, allowed one shower per year, chained some to beds, and inflicted escalating physical punishments, including beatings with belts and even confining kids in dog cages. Neighbors noticed the children rarely seen outside, appearing pale and unusually quiet. Despite these signs, no one ever called the cops on them. However, a critical turn came around January 14, 2018. The family was preparing to move to Oklahoma when 17-year-old Jordan Turpin seized her opportunity. She escaped through a window, weak and small enough to seem 7 years younger, and used a deactivated phone to call 911. Law enforcement arrived and made a harrowing discovery. 7 adult-aged siblings were found shackled and underweight, 7 of the 13 being adults aged 18 to 29, yet so emaciated they appeared children. Authorities noted chains and padlocks affixed to bunk beds. David and Louise were arrested on charges including torture, false imprisonment, child abuse, and a lewd act on a minor for David. Both pleaded not guilty initially and were held on $12 million bail each. The children, 6 minors and 7 adults, were taken to local hospitals where doctors confirmed severe malnutrition and multiple bruises and injuries. In the months that followed, legal proceedings gained momentum. In early 2018, Riverside County charged the Turpins with dozens of offenses, including torture and child abuse, David also faced perjury charges related to misrepresenting their homeschooling status. The couple was ordered to have no contact with their children. In April 2019, they each received sentences of 25 years to life in prison. After rescue, the siblings entered foster care. Unfortunately, a later scandal revealed that 6 siblings suffered further abuse at the hands of foster parents, including beatings with belts and sandals and sexual misconduct. The foster guardians later pled guilty and received prison time, while the siblings filed a lawsuit alleging systemic failures of the foster system. Despite trauma, several survivors have pursued healing publicly. Sisters Jordan and Jennifer have spoken about their experiences, aiming for motivational work. Next is Raymond and Vanessa Jackson. In the early 2000s, Raymond and Vanessa Jackson of Collingswood, New Jersey, fostered and adopted multiple children that they would almost starve to death. However, on the morning of October 10, 2003, a neighbor alerted police that a frail kid was rummaging through trash for food. Responding officers discovered their kid named Bruce outside, barefoot, disoriented, weighing approximately 45 pounds, and standing only 4 feet tall. Inside the home were his equally malnourished brothers, Michael at 23 pounds, Terrell at 28 pounds, and Treshawn at 40 pounds. They all showed signs of extreme neglect, lice, distended bellies, and visible ribs. Authorities quickly removed the boys for emergency medical care. The Jacksons were charged with 8 counts of aggravated assault and 20 counts of child endangerment for depriving the boys of proper food and a sanitary environment. Raymond Jackson died from a stroke in November 2004 before the trial concluded. Vanessa Jackson pled guilty in February 2006, admitting to starving her children, and received a 7-year prison sentence, though reports indicate she served closer to 1 year. Following their rescue, the boys were eventually adopted by the Parrish family in 2010, with 3 being raised in Millville, New Jersey. By that time, they were thriving physically and emotionally, even holding a fundraiser and attending community events to mark their recovery. Moving on to Sarah Lloyd Jones and Alan Titford. In 2020, the parents would completely neglect their girl named Kaylia, born in 2004 with spina bifida and hydrocephalus that led her to be bound in a wheelchair. When the UK went into its first COVID-19 lockdown on March 23, 2020, Kaylia stopped attending school and her world rapidly deteriorated. Isolated at home and hidden from external oversight, her health spiraled within months. By mid-2020, both parents ignored mounting professional support. Social services and pediatric specialists, including offers from Birmingham Children's Hospital, had either been dismissed outright or never actually engaged. Kaylia was confined to her small, outgrown wheelchair until it became unusable, leaving her bedridden. Emergency responders later described maggots feeding on her body, flypaper stuck with flies, bottles of urine at her bedside, and rotting food containers everywhere from no one taking care of her. They would then find texts from Kaylia begging for help. Kaylia texted, "Can you come and check if I have pooed because it stinks?" Her mother replied, "FFS." On the night of September 10th to 10th, 2020, Kaylia was found dead in her bed. Paramedics and police found her lying naked among filth. She was morbidly obese at 146 kilograms with necrotic ulcers, untreated infections, and a body ravaged by immobility and neglect. Her death was officially attributed to inflammation and infection arising from obesity and its complications. Both were convicted of gross negligence manslaughter, the first such case in UK history where parents were prosecuted for failing to control a child's weight. During trial, the judge emphasized their sustained neglect, noting that they failed to keep Kaylia mobile, clean, nourished, or medically supported, despite the obvious risks. On March 1st, 2023 at Swansea Crown Court, Alan received 7.5 years imprisonment and Sarah 6 years. Their sentences were later increased under the unduly lenient appeal to 10 years and 8 years respectively. Next is Jean K. Whitefeather and Donald Lance. The couple, both white and in their early 60s, had adopted 5 black kids, ranging in age from approximately 5 to 16, which they would treat as slaves. The family relocated to a rural property in Sissonville, West Virginia in May 2023, where they were made to perform physically demanding farm chores from dawn well into the evening. On October 2nd, 2023, a concerned neighbor alerted authorities after observing the oldest girl and her teenage brother locked inside a shed shed on the property for an extended period, while Donald Lance left them behind. Deputies forced entry into the shed using a crowbar, discovering a makeshift sleeping environment equipped with just a sleeping bag, non-working air conditioner, camping toilet, and a cooler. Inside the main residence, officers found a 9-year-old girl crying alone in an unsecured loft and another young child in soiled clothes, both victims of neglect. Additional searches revealed the eldest boy barefoot with sores, and all children reeking of body odor. They were promptly placed under the care of West Virginia Child Protective Services. Their criminal trial commenced on January 14, 2025, before Judge Mary Claire Akers in Kanawha County Circuit Court. Prosecutors charged them with forced labor, human trafficking, civil rights violations, child abuse, and gross neglect. The defense, led by Mark Plants and John Belenovich, claimed their clients were overwhelmed by the children's past trauma and behavioral challenges. During the trial, testimony from neighbors illustrated that Lance forced the children to haul heavy items such as fencing, propane tanks, and water across the farm, and that the children were subjected to verbal abuse evident from racist slurs used by Whitefeather. The eldest girl recounted how they were forced to stand with hands on their head for prolonged periods, limited to a sparse diet of peanut butter sandwiches, made to sleep on hard floors, denied proper toilet access apart from shared buckets, and compelled to remain in the shed. On January 29, 2025, after approximately 8 hours of jury deliberations, both defendants were found guilty. Whitefeather convicted on all 19 counts against her, Lance on 12 of 16 counts. Whitefeather received a sentence totaling 215 years in prison, while Lance was sentenced to 160 years. Each must also pay approximately $280,000 in restitution. Despite these lengthy terms, eligibility for parole remains after serving 40 years for Whitefeather and 30 years for Lance. Adam Robert Corden, Britton, was a crocodile expert for a big show called Animal Face-Off until he was exposed for violating his own animals. According to court documents, Britton had a long history of deeply inappropriate behavior toward animals, which allegedly began in his early teens, but things escalated dramatically in 2014 when he began adopting dogs, often rescues, and subjecting them to extreme abuse. He kept the dogs in a shipping container on his property in Darwin, Australia. There, he filmed himself torturing, sexually abusing, and ultimately killing many of them. He referred to this place as his torture room. Britton shared these videos with others through encrypted apps like Telegram, encouraging a disturbing underground network to commit similar acts. In April 2022, authorities received an anonymous tip containing one of these videos. That launched Operation Hain, which led to a raid on Britton's home. Investigators found 44 devices, various weapons, remains of multiple dogs, and child abuse material classified as the worst category under Australian law. Britton was arrested in April 2022, but his identity was kept from the public until September 2023. When finally unmasked, he faced over 50 charges, including bestiality, aggravated animal cruelty, possession and distribution of child abuse material, and more. In court, Britton pleaded guilty to all charges. The official summary stated he had abused 42 dogs, and that at least 39 died as a result. He was sentenced to 10 years and 5 months in prison, with a minimum of 6 years before parole. He's also been banned from owning or being around animals for life. Moving on to Jeannie Maxson. Jeannie Maxson was 69 years old when she left her cats in her U-Haul with no AC. On June 29, 2025, deputies from the Merced County Sheriff's Office were dispatched to a Taco Bell parking lot in Santanella, California, following reports from witnesses of cats trapped inside a U-Haul van. Upon arrival, Deputy Ross peered inside the hot parked van and immediately observed at least 20 cats visibly suffering. The scene quickly escalated when animal control officers were summoned to conduct a thorough inspection. A total of 134 cats, ranging in age from just 1 week to 8 years, were crammed into the vehicle. Of these, 106 were severely skinny, and tragically, 28 were already deceased. There was no food or water present, and the outside temperature that afternoon soared into the high 90s, making conditions within the van lethal. Following the discovery, all surviving cats were removed and transported to the Merced County Animal Shelter. Veterinarians from the nearby Atwater Veterinary Center joined the effort to stabilize the animals and initiate urgent medical care. Merced County authorities identified the van's owner as Jeannie Maxson, who was arrested at the scene and booked into the Merced County Jail. She faced 93 counts of animal cruelty. As of early July 2025, Jeannie Maxson remained in custody. There's currently no information on if she was actually charged and sentenced. Meanwhile, the surviving cats continued to receive veterinary attention, and authorities prepared for eventual adoptions once they are deemed well enough. Next is Jairus Ming Schrader. Jairus Ming Schrader filmed himself torturing a dog over a series of months in January 2025. In late January, law enforcement executed a search warrant at his residence on Country Club Drive, Fulton County, Georgia, following reports from neighbors that he had been abusing the animal and documenting the cruelty. In one of the final documented incidents, the dog suffered catastrophic injuries, a fractured skull, multiple broken bones, and paralysis. Authorities removed 3 additional dogs and children from the property, later arranging care and adoption for them. The children were taken into protective custody by the Division of Family and Child Services. Schrader was in custody on bond for multiple prior felonies, including aggravated battery, false imprisonment, inciting a riot, conspiracy to commit a felony, reckless conduct, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. He and a woman identified as Amira Wilkins, a possible girlfriend, faced additional charges stemming from the scene. Following his arrest, Schrader was charged with 2 counts of aggravated animal cruelty. His bond was immediately revoked. Here is Alida Rogis, age 27, is Canada's most notorious serial cat killer. Rogis' crimes began after a personal breakup in 2018. During that year, she strangled a cat she'd adopted, leaving it for dead in a park. However, luckily, the animal did survive, but that wasn't the only one she tried to kill. Between 2018 and 2022, Rogis adopted 9 cats via online classifieds and shelters. Initially, she tortured rather than killed them, beating, kicking, and strangling each feline to inflict maximum suffering. She often recorded these acts, repeatedly watching them because it made her feel good. In some cases, she left mutilated bodies on neighbors' picnic tables or porch steps solely to observe the reactions of the people who discovered them. That's just crazy. The intensity of her violence escalated in October 2022 when she began killing the animals permanently. Rogis admitted that between 2018 and early 2023, she tortured 9 cats and killed 7, often disposing of some bodies by throwing them into the river. A forensic psychiatrist at Calgary's Peter Lougheed Center later assessed her as a psychopath and sociopath with a moderate to high likelihood of reoffending. She was luckily arrested, and in March 2023, Rogis pleaded guilty to 10 criminal charges in Alberta Court of Justice, 9 counts of animal cruelty, and 1 count of threatening property damage. As part of her guilty plea, she publicly admitted, "I have a problem with hurting animals, and you need to do something about it." On September 15, 2023, Judge Mike Dinkel handed down a landmark sentence, 6.5 years in prison and a lifetime ban on owning animals. While the court initially calculated a cumulative sentence exceeding 12 years, Judge Dinkel reduced it in consideration of her status as a young offender. Next is Isaac Yadgarov. Isaac Yadgarov was living in Queens, New York, where he would trap 48 dogs in his tiny apartment. On May 7, 2025, neighbors reported the foul odor from his unit often permeated the hallway, and recalling hearing incessant barking from the dogs. So amid mounting housing issues, Yadgarov was in the final stages of being evicted from his 1-bedroom apartment. The next day, May 8th, responders entered the apartment. They encountered a 48 Belgian Malinois dogs confined in a cramped, filthy space strewn with urine, feces, and an overpowering smell of ammonia. Some of the animals were discovered in closets, even drawers, deprived of light, fresh air, and mobility. The extreme conditions hindered rescuers' ability to move and breathe safely. 3 of the dogs were found in such critical condition that rescue teams made the difficult decision to humanely euthanize them on the spot. The remaining 45 animals were transported to care facilities, where they underwent medical care, nourishment, and rehabilitation to prepare them for eventual adoption. Animal welfare groups described them as severely under-socialized. Most had never walked on grass or experienced fresh air. Yadgarov himself was not present at the time of the rescue, having already been evicted. However, on May 13, 2025, he turned himself in and was officially taken into custody. By June 2nd, he appeared before Queens Criminal Court Judge Edward Daniels, where he was arraigned on a staggering 96 misdemeanor counts, 48 counts of aggravated cruelty to animals, and 48 counts of failure to provide adequate food, water, and shelter. If convicted, Yadgarov faces up to 1 year in jail, the maximum penalty for the charges. Finally is is Luis Augusto Pinheiro de Souza. In early November 2021, anonymous tip reported that hundreds of buffalo were confined on Luis's farm without adequate access to food or water. Concerned environmental police responded and discovered approximately 500 severely malnourished buffalo, many too weak even to stand, surrounded by the bodies of those that had already died. Press attention quickly escalated, with volunteers, including veterinarians, mobilizing to deliver water, feed, and medical care. One volunteer doctor described the scene as a war zone, estimating around 500 buffalo had perished from hunger or neglect, while around 667 were still alive but in critical condition. Luis Augusto, who also operates a buffalo-themed restaurant in Brotas, publicly denied the allegations. In interviews with Globo TV, he stated that the animals had not been intentionally abandoned, claiming some died naturally, and that food and water were available. He insisted the deaths were due to natural causes. On November 11, 2021, Luis Augusto was arrested following an inspection by the police chief Douglas Brandão do Amaral. The inspection revealed that the owner was using a tractor to destroy what little pasture remained, a move the authorities interpreted as a deliberate attempt to exacerbate the animals' suffering. As the investigation unfolded, it emerged that over 1,000 buffalo had been affected. Some sources estimate 1,056 buffalo and an additional 72 horses and mares. In the aftermath, Luis Augusto faced multiple large fines, including a previous 2.13 million reais fine for animal mistreatment and another 1.45 million reais issued around the same time, totaling almost $650,000. Samson Shelton. While Shelton was a respected teacher, he would ruin his reputation after he was found to have killed someone. In 2006, he reconnected with a former student, 17-year-old Ashley Reeves, whom he had taught in middle school. According to later investigations and subsequent confessions, Shelton exploited the trust in their teacher-student relationship to start a sexual relationship, which is why he had to try to get rid of her before he was exposed. So on April 27, 2006, Reeves disappeared following what was supposed to be a basketball meetup. Alarmed, her mother combed through her daughter's call logs and discovered multiple calls to Shelton, prompting detectives to question him the next day. Initially, he portrayed their relationship as one-sided, claiming Reeves had been infatuated, calling him constantly, but under pressure, his story began to crack. After approximately 12 hours of interrogation, Shelton confessed to assaulting Ashley during a drive. He admitted placing her in a chokehold, believing he had killed her, and then dragging her into a wooded area. There, he wrapped a belt around her neck to make her death seem staged. He left her body, returned to a country dance bar, and resumed his night as though nothing had happened. Unbeknownst to him, Ashley was still alive. She laid unconscious and was severely injured. Her neck was broken, suffering brain trauma, until she was discovered by investigators combing the area. Emergency responders rushed her to the hospital, where she was placed in a medically induced coma. Over a few months, she faced the daunting task of relearning how to swallow, walk, and talk after her injuries. Shelton was charged with attempted murder in 2007 after pleading guilty to the crimes. That same year, he was sentenced to 20 years in Illinois prison, with over 85% of the sentence served before his eventual release. On April 22, 2024, after serving roughly 17 years behind bars, Shelton was granted parole. He is now obligated to complete a 3-year parole period with strict terms, including no contact with Reeves. Since his release, information about Shelton's life remains sparse. Reports indicate he is living free, subject to parole supervision. Meanwhile, Ashley Reeves has sought to move forward. She has shared parts of her journey in interviews and a memoir that was later adapted into the Lifetime film Left for Dead, the Ashley Reeves story, although she has expressed a desire to leave that trauma behind. Let's move on to the story of Mark Berndt, the teacher who had violated and traumatized over 20 students over 5 years. Mark Berndt began his career in 1979 as a 3rd-grade teacher at Miramonte Elementary School, building a reputation within the Los Angeles Unified School District. However, beneath this facade, troubling incidents were alleged. In 1983, a parent reported that Berndt had dropped his pants during a field trip, an allegation known to school officials but not pursued legally. Nearly 10 years later, in 1993, a female student came forward accusing him of inappropriate touching, and other students later described him masturbating in class, reports that were insufficiently substantiated at the time to prompt charges. The first formal disciplinary action came in March 2011, when Berndt was fired shortly after the discovery of dozens of disturbing snapshots. These photos showed blindfolded children with taped mouths, some with live cockroaches placed on them and holding spoons containing an unknown white liquid. DNA tests later linked the liquid and a container back to Bernd, revealing that he had incorporated his white liquid, if you know what I'm talking about, into classroom tasting games and laced cookies served to students. Authorities determined that from approximately 2005 to 2010, Bernd had sexually abused at least 23 students, both boys and girls aged 7 to 10. In January 2012, at age 61, he was arrested at his home in Torrance on 23 felony counts of lewd conduct. Bail was initially set at $2.3 million. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community and prompted Miramonte to shut down temporarily, rehire the entire staff, and place a psychiatric social worker in every classroom amid the fallout. In November 2013, Bernd, then 62, pleaded no contest to all 23 counts under a plea agreement aimed at sparing his young victims the trauma of testifying. He was immediately sentenced to 25 years in prison, a de facto life term for many. After his plea, a confidential 512-page report revealed that Bernd's misconduct appeared far more extensive than initially known. Investigators identified over 100 potential victims, with multiple students reporting exposure to sexual acts beyond the tasting games, such as inappropriate touching and encouragement to touch him. The scandal triggered civil suits against the school district. By 2014, the district had agreed to a monumental $139 million settlement for 69 parents and 81 students, along with earlier $30 million payouts for 63 other victims. That's a pretty insane story, just like the story of Heinz Schmidt. On June 20th, 1913, Schmidt walked into a school shortly before 11 a.m. and unleashed a horrific attack. He had arrived in Bremen's St. Mary's Catholic School only the previous December, after resigning from his position in Stolp following a severe mental breakdown. His behavior in Bremen was increasingly erratic and reclusive. On that fateful morning, as recess neared, Schmidt stormed up the stairs carrying a heavy briefcase containing multiple Browning semi-automatic pistols and ammunition. He first encountered teacher Maria Pohl and threatened her with his gun. Then, without uttering a single word, he opened fire on a class of 60 girls aged 5 to 8 in room 8A. 2 girls died instantly, while another, Maria Anna Rishlik, was shot upstairs and later succumbed to her wounds. Sophie Gornisevich, attempting to escape, fell down the stairs and suffered a fatal neck injury. Dozens of other children were injured in the massacre, which stretched beyond the classrooms into stairwells and the courtyard, where additional shots wounded 5 boys and even a nearby roofer. Chaos erupted as staff and students fled. The janitor, known as Butz, courageously tackled Schmidt despite being shot in the face. Later, teacher Hubert Millman also confronted him. Schmidt shot him twice before being wrestled to the ground. Overwhelmed attackers from the crowd finally subdued Schmidt, and police escorted him away as bystanders nearly killed him. The rampage lasted approximately 15 minutes. In total, Schmidt fired around 35 rounds, leaving 5 children dead and 21 wounded, including adults. Roughly 30,000 attended the girls' joint funeral procession, causing even Kaiser Wilhelm II to pause a major military parade. Psychiatrists later declared Schmidt legally unfit for trial, and he was committed to the St. Jurgen Asylum in Ellen, where he remained until his death from tuberculosis on March 31st, 1932, at the age of 48. Next is one of the craziest stories I could find: Galina Kovalenko, the teacher who wanted to sell her students organs. In late 2016, Ukrainian undercover police began investigating rumors surrounding Kovalenko's activities. Eventually, they lured her into a sting operation, posing as organ traffickers interested in purchasing the teenager. They arranged a transaction reportedly worth around $10,000, with some reports estimating up to $13,000, intended to resolve Kovalenko's mounting personal debts. On Monday, 21st November 2016, the police stepped in. Kovalenko was arrested while escorting the child from the boarding school, reportedly as a handover was about to take place. Ukraine's Interior Minister Arsen Avakov later described her being caught red-handed while leading the girl to the arranged meeting point and receiving payment. By Wednesday, 23rd November 2016, Kovalenko appeared before a Kharkiv court where she was formally charged with human trafficking. Photos taken at the hearing by Union photographers showed her in the courtroom behind the bars of the dock, a clear sign of the gravity of the charges. The court ordered 2 months of pretrial detention. Investigators allege she had been preparing the transaction for nearly a year, even providing the buyers with the students' medical records and photos for an additional fee of 1,000 hryvnias, approximately $52. Kovalenko publicly denied all allegations, asserting that she had been set up. She faced up to 15 years in prison if convicted. Meanwhile, authorities emphasized that the teenage victim was safe and not harmed during the sting operation. Now moving on to Raymond Payne. Raymond Payne, an English teacher at Strong Vincent High School in Erie County, Pennsylvania, became at the center of one of the most notorious student murders of the 1970s. Payne was living and working as a well-liked teacher in Erie by the mid-1970s. In October 1975, 16-year-old student Debbie Gamma disappeared and was later found dead, bound and drowned in Cusawago Creek in Crawford County. Over the next several months, investigators honed in on Payne, one of Debbie's favorite teachers. His arrest came in 1976, about a year after Debbie's death, following intensifying police efforts. After his arrest, he confessed to tying Debbie up and strangling her, asserting it was linked to a long-held sexual fantasy involving bondage. In 1977, he pleaded guilty to a general murder count. A panel of 3 county judges then reviewed his case in a guilt hearing, ultimately classifying the crime as first-degree murder. Payne received a life sentence without parole. While in prison, Payne embarked on a years-long legal battle. Finally, in 2014, a federal judge approved DNA testing that revealed Payne did not contribute to the traces of seminal fluid found on Debbie's body. Despite the DNA twists, Payne argued that the findings supported downgrading his conviction from first to third-degree murder, which did not work. Payne remained incarcerated at the State Correctional Institution at Laurel Highlands until his death.